Howdy everyone! I'm Casey at Home with Casey and welcome to Tasty Tuesday. I just love Tasty Tuesdays because I love to share my ideas and my fun things that I do. Well, you've seen me cooking quite a bit, and when I cook, I like to throw a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and just kind of create it to my palate, and if you want a little bit spicy or not. Well, today, we're baking. That's right. We're gonna be baking. We are baking an apple fritter bread. Thanks to my friend Nisa, who scours the internet to send me funny clips of all kinds of crazy things, but this was one of her better ones. I like apple fritters. They're like a donut. They're doughy, soft, and just delicious. So today I'm going to put together an easy apple fritter bread. Now, baking, as I said, is more of an exact science. So you have to measure and you have to make sure that it gets right so that everything will come out when we put it in the oven. So what I've done is I've prepared things ahead of time. So let's go ahead and get started. Now, it is good grief. If you guys love, I love football, you know that. Great playoff weekends, Super Bowl's coming up, the Olympics are coming up, and right now, the Australian Open is on. So if you're a sports fan, this is really a cool time. Now, anyway, back to baking. I preheated my oven to 350. Now, in my oven, I have a little thermometer because I really wanted to make sure. Some ovens are a little bit low heat and some are cook a little bit high. So on my oven, I discovered that 350 is actually 365. So that's an important distinction. So it's just a thermometer that I hang on the rack down there, and then when I turn the oven on, I really know where that temperature is at. So I preheated the oven. I've also prepared my bread pan. Now I put some nonstick spray in there, and this is a metal pan. And so, you know, cooking metal versus glass, a lot of times bread pans are metal. They conduct heat really nicely. They create a nice brown. So it's really the choice of pans. But if you're going to use glass in any type of baking, just be aware that when it gets hot, it gets really hot, and you might have to cook at a lower temperature. So my oven and my pan are ready, and I've also prepared some of the other elements. Now, in the apple fritter, there's cinnamon, sugar, all kinds. So I put together a little bit of brown sugar, light brown sugar, and cinnamon, and that's gonna be going inside of this apple fritter bread to create the lusciousness. Now, the main ingredient, apples. A lot of times when we're baking, we use Granny Smith apples because they're a little bit tart. My mom is a huge fan of Granny Smiths because we use sugar in things like in apple pies. The tartness kind of offsets that. I'm a big fan of eating apples of the Honeycrisp, and I also like Gala. So what I had here today, I have a Honeycrisp, and it's going to be a little bit sweeter, but I love sweet. So you can see I've cut this apple into cubes, not real small, but into cubes, not unlike the slices that you would do for pies. And I also added to these, just peeled and diced up my apple and added some sugar and some cinnamon. So it's really marinating in there and getting nice and delicious. So we have dry ingredients and we have wet. My dry ingredients are just all-purpose flour, and I use my whisk to mix in the other dry ingredient, which is baking powder, right? So I just want to make sure that they get nice and blended. Now you can use sort of a sifter and make it light and airy, and frequently you'll see that when people are baking. Now we're going to put the wet ingredients together. So it calls for room temperature butter, and when they say room temperature, do want to do room temperature because it makes a difference in that recipe. Right? So in this recipe, it calls for room temperature butter, room temperature egg, and room temperature milk. Because when it's at room temperature, it mixes better and it creates an emulsion, so your batter or your cake, whatever it is you're baking, is a little bit fluffier. So you want to just be mindful of that when it calls for that. So I have here, I've already started sort of putting together the sugar and the butter. And you can use a blender. If I had one of those stand-up mixers, that would be totally awesome. right? And it just would make life easier. You can also use a hand mixer, but so after you get your sugar and your butter all put together, you're gonna add your eggs. Now I halved the recipe here. I've already put one together, but I'm gonna just 1 egg at a time. I'm gonna crack that sucker, and I'm gonna make sure to mix that really well inside of my butter. Now, again, I love to bake. I mean, I like to bake cookies and banana bread, and every once in a while, you know, get crazy. If I'm gonna make a cake, usually comes out of a box, but don't tell anyone. Arua makes beautiful cakes. That's Sarah's daughter, you know, from scratch. She's 15. So, future baker there. All right, so after we have all this blended, I'm gonna be adding the vanilla. Now, I am using some pure organic vanilla, and I highly recommend, highly, that you step up your vanilla, right? So you can just buy some less expensive, but if you do put a little bit more money into the vanilla, it's gonna give you a total bang for your buck, right? So we're just gonna do a little bit of a half a teaspoon, so we're gonna use 1/4 teaspoon. But yeah, it'll really make the difference if you spend a little bit more money. I was in Mexico a couple years ago and I bought some beautiful vanilla. Oh my gosh, it is truly, truly amazing. Delicious. So here I go, I'm gonna mix that together. And really, like, you know, when we're cooking, if we're eating organic, it makes a difference. You can taste the difference. When we're baking, you know, all-purpose flour, but you can buy some other types of flour that'll really make a difference as well. So now we want to put the dry into the wet and make sure that gets all mixed up. So I'm just gonna pour my dry into my wet. Now you can do it a little bit at a time. A lot of recipes will suggest adding a little bit. I know when I'm making my banana bread, I just add the wet a little bit at a time. My sister Kimber is a beautiful baker. I mean, she's beautiful, but I mean, she's a great baker. She makes some of the most delicious stuff. And it's really kind of fun. I'm gonna go ahead and bake this. And it just is such a lovely freedom in that. And if you do like to bake and you're also counting calories, this is a great opportunity to bake something and then give some of it away. You know how people love that kind of stuff. All right, so we've mixed the wet with the dry, but hold on. I have yet another wet ingredient, and it is room temperature milk. I know, right? Once you mix the dry with the wet, that's it. Well, I was surprised. So here we go. Now that the dry and wet are together, I'm going to add the milk to that and get it all mixed up. So again, a blender would be, or a mixer would be great if you have one of those stand-up mixers. I think that's a great investment if you love to bake, if you like to bake breads or what have you. So here we go. Now I've got that milk all blended up. And now we're gonna put it all together. And this is kind of one of those, it's a layering thing, right? So here we go. I'm gonna take half of this wet mixture right here. And again, if you use the hand mixer, it would be less lumpy for sure. So I'm gonna put half of my wet in here. And I'm gonna make sure that it just kind of gets evened out. This is probably just a little bit for this pan, but that's all right. Come on, this is Tasty Tuesday. We're having some FUN. All right, so I'm gonna take my apples, half of my apples, and I'm gonna just layer them down onto that batter. I love it. It's so simple, so stinking simple. Then we're gonna take half of our brown sugar and cinnamon and just put that on top of that. And then now we're gonna take the rest of the batter. Now I always like to use a spatula, you know, and it would be, you know, totally awesome. Here it is. And just get every bit of this batter out because man, you guys, this batter is delicious. So I'm gonna take the rest of the batter just down on top. And you know, these kind of steps you really don't need to see because it's not it's not rocket science, but it's fun to bake and it's fun to put things together. And when you put all these ingredients together, you get this really delicious thing. So I'm going to spread the other half down in there, down into the pan. Okay, so now I'm going to add the rest of the apples and just kind of spread them around. So you can do this, for example, this is in a bread pan, but I can see doing the same thing in a, for example, a bundt pan. I'm a big fan of the bundt pan. And so then I'm going to sprinkle the remaining cinnamon sugar on there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take a knife and I'm going to swirl. So we have it layered in here. And what I'm going to do is take my knife and I'm just going to kind of swirl it through the pan like that. And then when it comes out, all this stuff is going to be swirled around. All right, so this thing is ready to go. I'm going to pop it in the oven. Takes about an hour. So that was really easy to put together. So bakes an hour, you're going to cool it, and check this out. I kid you not. Check it out. This is amazing, you guys. This apple fritter bread. Look at that. So you look at the apples on top that cooked, and look at that layer of apple and this tenderness of that cake. It's amazing. Okay, so this is my kitchen, my house. I'm just gonna go take a taste. Oh God. Yeah, it's tender, it's moist. I mean, look at that. That apple fritter bread. Hi gang. That's a quick, easy baking. Guys, let me know what you bake. What's your favorite sort of go-to cakes or breads or anything like that? I have so much fun here, and I thank you for joining me each week. Please, in the comments, tell me what's going on. Super Bowl Sunday's coming up February 13th, so we're going to talk about halftime food, Super Bowl party food coming up. So you guys stay tuned. I'm Casey, at home with Casey. Thanks for joining me for Tasty Tuesday Bacon, and we'll see you again next time.